Okay, so welcome to class number 3 on challenging texts from the Torah. And before we get into tonight's text, which is the Moabite prophet Balaam and the donkey, I wanted to get to a comment that Saul actually shared with me on Sunday when he was here for Cafe Shari Tefillah. About the idea that possibly the approach that I'm sharing with you to the text might seem to be a reform approach to the text. So I want to kind of explain this in a way to assure you that I am not a reform rabbi. And I know that for sure because a reform rabbi asked me today to help him figure out how to sell chametz for people in his congregation. It's because he's never had to do that before. This is a colleague of mine who I met when I was studied in Israel for the 3-year Hartman program. So, selling your chametz for Passover, that's a Jewish legal thing to do. And so therefore, almost by definition, it's not something that Reform Jews do. Because Reform Judaism is not about the legalities of Judaism and not about the intricacies of the mitzvot. It's about the more spiritual aspects of Judaism, to put it very, very simply and generally. So he's never had to sell chametz before or be an agent for the sale, but he's with a congregation on the North Shore of Long Island that just merged with a conservative synagogue. The merged congregation is a Reform synagogue, but it has leftover conservative Jews in it who approached him and said, "We want to sell our chametz." So he took my form that's online and reworded it a little bit, added some more explanations than I have in there, and then just wanted to go through the procedures with me. So rest assured, I am a conservative rabbi. That Reform rabbi knows I'm a conservative rabbi. But the approach to text is, the approach I'm sharing is just not a traditional approach, which doesn't mean it's not a Jewish approach. So let me explain this again. The issues that we have when we read the Bible is that when we read Torah and the rest of the Bible, we bring to the reading our own mindset and how we were trained in reading, right? So we're all trained, we're all high school graduates. So by being a high school graduate, you've been through English class, knowing how to read English literature, Shakespeare, American literature, whatnot, you know how to read with a critical eye. So if that's how you know how to read, to ask questions as you read and try to figure out who the author is and what the author is trying to say and what's the meaning, what's the significance of the symbolism in the story, right, from as something as in your face as Hamlet with the skull of his father in his hand to something a lot more subtle in a lot more literature. If we're trained to read that way, why shouldn't we read the Torah the same way? Right? So it would be natural that we're reading the text that way. And if we read the Torah that way, then we are faced with more challenges than if we read it in the traditional way. So in other words, the traditional rabbinic approach to reading the text is God wrote this. Okay? Whereas a modern approach, a modern academic approach, a Western approach, let's say, would be to ask who the author is and not just take it for granted that God wrote it. Okay? Because if we take it for granted that God wrote it, and we still apply our training in how we read literature to that, then we have questions. We naturally have questions. Okay, so that's one way to look at how we are challenged by reading the Torah, because we read the Torah with this literature mindset. And this also holds true for those who went to Jewish day school. So those who went to a Solomon Schechter school or a pluralistic Jewish day school like the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School here in Rockville, you have the approach to American literature, and you have the approach to Bible and Jewish text in the separate Judaic classes that are all taught in this critical method. That's what it's called, critical thinking. It's only in the Hebrew Academy, for example, or other Orthodox day schools that there would be this demarcation, and very clear demarcation, between the English class and reading Hamlet and the Jewish studies class and reading Talmud and Torah. Okay? So, what I also want to say then, so let's say we can separate our brain and say when we read Torah, we're going to read it in a Jewish way, and when we read any other literature, we're going to read it in our academic way that we were trained in high school, in public school or day school. Even if we do that, I'm suggesting that even reading the Jewish way, there's still challenges to the text. And that the rabbis recognize that there are challenges to the text, but through their method of interpretation. And that one easy way for the rabbis to answer the challenges for the text was that not only did the 5 books of Moses, did Moses receive those from God at Mount Sinai, but Moses also received the Mishnah and the Gemara. That is, the first part of rabbinic literature that was finally edited in the year 500, so 1,500 years ago, that also Moses received at Mount Sinai. That was the rabbi's way of answering, in one very simple, broad way, how to resolve some challenges in the text. From as simple as, from all of the laws of Shabbat and Kashrut that we have, that are not here in the text specifically, that the rabbis added, to what we to the idea of what we learned last time, the eye for an eye, that means a fine, and that it's not literal. Okay, so those challenges are answered by the rabbi saying that Moses received the rabbinic, the oral Torah at Mount Sinai also. Okay, so what I'm saying is then ultimately that reading the Torah through the academic way and trying to apply history and science and that kind of methodology to the text is only an extension of what the rabbis did, and there's nothing not Jewish about it. And that ultimately what we want to do, what we have to do as religious Jews, is accept the divinity of the text in however we want to define that. And the divinity of the text means, it could be that that Moses received it literally from God at Mount Sinai, to Moses having an experience with God at Mount Sinai and writing about it afterwards, to Moses and the people of Israel experiencing something at Mount Sinai and over the course of time then writing it down. All of that reflects the idea of the divinity of the text. And if we end, if our basic given is that the text of the Torah is divine, then it's okay in how we interpret it. Okay? It's just that depending on the denomination, we might have a particular agenda to interpreting. In other words, as conservative Jews, in looking at the legal elements of the text of the Torah, we carry on the rabbinic tradition of interpreting it in that legal way. Okay, just so we carry it down. We can apply modern methods of literary analysis to the text, as long as we maintain the given that this isn't just another book of literature, that there's something divine to it. And that doesn't make us reform. It doesn't make it. It is still it is a Jewish way to look at the text. So, any thoughts or comments about that? So,
I just have a question.
Yeah.
You know, Moses spent 40 days, 40 nights up in Mount Sinai.
Yes.
Is there any kind of stories about how he was reading the Torah and writing the Mishnah and Gemara and interpreting it? It took so long.
Right. So Saul's asking, what did Moses do on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights? Again, that's because the Torah says he was up there for 40 days, right? So is that literal 40 days, or is 40 a number in the Torah that reflects just it's a big number? He was there for a long time, like the rain fell for 40 days, and they were in the desert for 40 years. So 40 is a number that is like 7 in the Torah, is a meaningful number, which Bible scholars show that in other contemporary societies, the number 40 is just a big number. So it could be 40 days, literally, or it could be he was there for a long time. But yes, there are stories, rabbinic stories of what he did up there, but the Torah doesn't tell us what he did up there. Well, the Torah suggests that he learned the Torah in those 40 days. But the rabbis have plenty of midrash as to exactly what happened there. How did Moses learn? What did he learn? Who helped him learn? What angels came down to help him learn, etc. All of that, rabbinic stories, but again, it's just ways of trying to figure out what exactly happened on Mount Sinai. So, which means that we could come up with stories about what happened in those 40 days too, and our stories that we come up with would be just as authoritative or credible as the rabbinic stories that are found in the Midrash. Okay, so one classic challenge text that I want to look at tonight is this story of Balaam and the donkey, and that this will reflect a couple of ideas that the rabbis are challenged about. So the context is the portion Balak, which is in the book of Numbers, in the book of Bamidbar. Often Balak is read in combination with the portion before it, Chukat. So Balak is the king of Moab. The Israelites are marching through the Sinai, and they're getting close to the land of Israel. But on their way, apparently they're on, if you can picture the map of that area in your mind's eye, they're on the Saudi Arabia-Jordan side at this point. Okay? So not the Sinai Peninsula side. So just north, so if you can picture where the Red Sea ends, or the Gulf of, depending which map you're looking at, the Gulf of Eilat or the Gulf of Aqaba, you have Eilat and Aqaba at the top, 2 port cities. So right above that, on the right-hand side is Jordan, what is now Jordan, and then below it Saudi Arabia. And on the left-hand side is Israel now, but the Sinai Peninsula and the Negev Desert. So they're on the right-hand side, and on the right-hand side is Moab. And then there's Ammon, and there's also Bashan as you go up towards the Dead Sea, but also on the eastern side. So in order, on their route, and if you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash, You can look at the maps that are in the back, and there's one map that has suggested routes for the wandering for 40 years, because we don't know exactly how they did it. And the towns that are listed at the end of Bamidbar, the stopping places, we really don't know where some of those spots are. Anyway, so they get to Moab, and Moab doesn't want to let them through. And instead of fighting them, because Moab has heard about how the Israelites are kind of protected by God and have this great power because they have God with them, the king of Moab, Balak, wants the chief prophet of the time to curse the Israelites. He figured, okay, the only way to fight God is with God's power. Use the prophet, my Moabite prophet, to curse the Israelites. Maybe that will work. So he goes to try to enlist Balaam, the prophet of the time, to curse them. And Balaam doesn't want to go. So finally, we get to chapter 22. I want to pick the translation I want to use. I'm using the Reform Movement edition of the Chumash, which they call the Torah, a modern commentary. It's a great edition. We just can't use it in shul because the editor decided to divide it up not based on the portions, but based on themes. So it doesn't have aliyot listed. It just has segments. So it'll have part of Balak here, and then broken up with some commentary and other thoughts, and then it goes on. So it's not really usable in a traditional service when you're reading a long section of Torah. Anyway, so the section that I want to look at is preceded by this. Then Balak sent other dignitaries, more numerous and distinguished than the first. They came to Balaam and said to him, "Thus says Balak, son of Zippor, please do not refuse to come to see me. I will reward you richly and will do anything you ask of me. Only come and damn this people for me." Right? Curse the people, and I'll even pay you handsomely for cursing them. Balaam replied to Balak's officials, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, big or little, contrary to the command of the Lord my God." All right, so Balaam is recognizing that, I can only curse or say anything about the people based on what God's telling me to do. So you can pay me all the money you want. It won't do any good unless God really wants me to say it. So you two stay here overnight, and let me find out what else the Lord may say to me. Right? So he's telling the officials, let me go converse with God. That night God came to Balaam and said to him, "If these men have come to invite you, you may go with them, but whatever I command you, that you shall do." Right? So go with them. And obviously we know that Balaam ends up blessing the people of Israel, very long blessing. 3 times he blesses them, including the famous Matovu. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob. But this is the key here. Now here comes the section. When he arose in the morning, Balaam saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. But God was incensed at his going, so an angel of the Lord placed himself in his way as an adversary. Okay, so picture this. He's riding his donkey, and let's say I'm on my donkey here in the chapel, and I'm headed towards the door down this aisle between these chairs. And at the doors is an angel in my way. Okay? He was riding on his female donkey with his 2 servants alongside. When the donkey caught sight of the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, that is, the angel has a drawn sword in its hand, the donkey swerved from the road and went into the fields. And Balaam beat the donkey to turn her back onto the road. Okay? So Balaam is riding on a donkey, has 2 servants walking alongside, which is very common. That's the way they did it. And the donkey sees the angel and swerves off the path to avoid the angel. And Balaam doesn't know what's happening. The angel of the Lord, because Balaam beats the donkey to get it to go back on the path. The angel of the Lord then stationed himself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. The donkey, seeing the angel of the Lord, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he, Balaam, beat her, the donkey, again. Okay, so picture this. So again, we're in the chapel. I'm riding the donkey down the aisle. The angel is at the door. The donkey sees the angel. I don't see the angel. The donkey swerves to go over to the wall to avoid it. And I'm beating the donkey to try to get it to go back on the road. It's not going. It's going on this other path that has a wall on either side. And to avoid the angel again, the donkey goes against the wall and crushes my foot against the wall, or presses my foot tightly against the wall. And I can't stand this because I don't know why the donkey is doing this. Okay? Any of us who have ridden a horse, right, who have never ridden a horse before, but you go and do some horse riding, right? So you're riding a horse that's being pulled by other horse and whatever. You kind of know how out of control you are on the horse. And they say that donkeys are even less tame or less manageable than a horse. It takes extra training to ride a donkey. And this is common for a donkey, but Balaam can't understand why his donkey is doing this. Then, this is verse 28, chapter 22. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times?" That's what the donkey is talking to Balaam. Balaam, not surprised that his donkey is talking to him, has a conversation. Balaam said to the donkey, "You have made a mockery of me. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you." The donkey said to Balaam, "Look, I am the donkey that you have been riding all along until this day. Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" And Balaam answered, "No." Then the Lord uncovered Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, his drawn sword in his hand. Thereupon he bowed right down to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? It is I who came out as an adversary, for the errand is obnoxious to me." That is, you going to follow Balak's wishes. "And when the donkey saw me, she shied away because of me those 3 times. If she had not shied away from me, you are the one I should have killed while sparing her." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I erred because I did not know that you were standing in my way. If you still disapprove, I will turn back." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you must say nothing except what I tell you." So Balaam went on with Balak's dignitaries. And the story goes on. Yes?
He was given permission to go. I mean, God told him it was okay to go.
Okay, I don't want to get into the issue of whether Balaam should have gone or not. The issue is a talking donkey.
No,
okay, that's the issue I want to talk about. Okay, yes, we know about Mr. Ed, Dr. Doolittle, right? Okay, so yes, we all know about these real things, right? So, the question is, what's the only other talking animal that we know of in the Torah? The serpent in the Garden of Eden. Those are the only 2. So the snake in the Garden of Eden and this donkey are the only 2 talking animals that we have in the Torah. And both those cases, the people who are being talked to by these animals are not surprised that these animals are talking to them. Right? So when the snake talks to Eve and says, "Here, taste this fruit," Eve doesn't say, "What? What is a snake doing talking to me?" She doesn't say that. She might have thought it, but the Torah doesn't record that. She just talks back. "But I'm not supposed to eat." And then the serpent says, but you can eat. Who says, what do you think's going to happen to you? That kind of thing, right? The donkey here. Balaam doesn't say, what? He doesn't jump off his donkey, surprised that his donkey's talking to him. He just has a normal conversation with him. And the donkey very intelligently says, I've been letting you ride me all these years. Have I ever steered you wrong before? You should have taken that into account, that maybe something's up with me. Maybe rightly I'm going off the path. So a normal conversation, as if the donkey is the chief servant of Balaam, not a talking animal. So the challenge, of course, is animals don't talk today, right? We have people who are paid a lot of money who think that they can talk to dogs and cats and horses, right? These so-called horse, dog, or cat whisperers, who are psychologists for animals, who can kind of sense what animals are saying to them, and clients pay them a lot of money to try to figure out why their cat or dog is acting despondently.
You're speaking from experience?
No, I would never pay such a dog or cat whisperer, but I do know that people do this. And these people have TV shows and make a lot of money doing this. But we know for a fact that animals don't talk in a human way. And not saying that animals don't communicate. Okay, and those who do have a dog or a cat and have had a dog or a cat for a long time, can probably sense what the dog or cat is trying to tell them, and that they can sense what the dog or cat wants. It's not what I'm talking about, and it's not what the rabbis are talking about either. What we're talking about is your cat or dog all of a sudden opening its mouth and making sounds that sound like human communication. Okay, that does not happen. And the rabbis knew that that doesn't happen. No rabbi recorded in the interpretations in the Midrash said, I remember a time when an animal spoke to me. Nobody said that. So what they had to try to reconcile is the fact that animals don't talk with the text that says Balaam's donkey is talking and the snake talked. How do we make sense of that? Okay? So, what do you suppose the rabbis would answer to this challenge in the text?
Is it a dream or something?
Okay. So that's very good. So that's one possibility Saul is suggesting, that it was a dream. Okay? The problem with that interpretation is that the text clearly says, and Balaam rose up in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab, and God's anger was kindled, and this event happened. So he woke up in the morning. So in other words, right before, he told these dignitaries who came, let's stay the night and let's see what God says to me at night. Nothing is recorded. All we have, Balaam woke up in the morning. And the word for rose, what Hertz and the Hertz Chumash is translating as rose, in this other, the Reform Movement translation says, one second, when he arose in the morning. Because the word in Hebrew is vayakom, and it means get up. In this context, it means to get up. Okay?
He did daydream.
Okay, so maybe it's a daydream. Okay? Or maybe it's a dream of him getting up in the morning. Okay? But again, if you're going to say it's a dream, you have to play with the text to try to prove your point that it's a dream. Because literally, the text says he got up. Okay? After having just said in the sentence before, let's sleep on it and let me see what God says. All right, Marv.
So the text says that God opened the mouth of the donkey.
Yes.
So it's a miracle.
Right.
It's simply God manipulating things. So
yes.
The laws of nature or circumvented.
Right. Okay. So the other traditional answer, as Marv is suggesting, is the text clearly says that God opened the mouth of the donkey. Let me say just a second. Yes, it says in verse 28, the Hebrew says, Vayiftach Adonai et pi ha'aton. Literally means God opened the mouth of the donkey. Okay? Or the female donkey, whatever. Okay? And whenever we get to this, I'm reminded of my year at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, my junior year. The student newspaper is called The Mouth of the Donkey, Pi Ha'aton. So it's just kind of a cute self-deprecatory way of titling the student newspaper. But clearly God's opening the mouth of the donkey, and so therefore it could be a dream. So Maimonides, the great medieval rabbi from Egypt, born in Spain but worked in Egypt in the late 1100s, early 1200s, great scholar in our Jewish tradition. He's the one who says that this is a dream. The rabbis before, earlier in the Middle Ages and from rabbinic times, say no. The text says God opened a donkey's mouth. It wasn't a dream. It literally happened because it says in the Torah that happened. It must have happened, and God is all-powerful. God can do it. Just because we haven't seen animals talk today doesn't mean that God can't make animals talk. So if God wants to do it, God can do it. But some rabbis suggest on a condition. So the condition being, because the rabbis don't see pop-up miracles happening like this, right? So that kind of put it in modern parlance like that. They know of great miracles that have happened, and we can look back on history and see that certain events could have been interpreted as miraculous, like the establishment of the State of Israel. At the time, the people in Israel were fighting against the Arab armies. But the fact that the war ended a year later in 1949 with an armistice and the State of Israel was established, looking back on it, you can see it's a miracle, and that's why there is a prayer added to the service on Israel's Independence Day along the lines of the one for Hanukkah and the one for Purim that say this was a miraculous event. Right? So nobody says that miracles can't happen. It's just the kind of miracle that happens. Do miracles happen for individuals, or do miracles happen on behalf of the whole community? So individual pop-up miracles, rabbis say, at least the rabbis in the Mishnah say, no, that doesn't happen. And so there are a few of them that are listed in the Torah. So Balaam's donkey, and for example, and the earth opening up to swallow Korach and his followers. So God set these events on a timer at the end of the 6th day of creation. So God finished creating the world on the 6th day, right, according to Genesis, with the creation of Adam and Eve. And then God rested on the 7th day. So at the twilight of the 6th day into the 7th day, that's when God made these events, planned these events to happen, and set them on a timer so that they would go off and happen as if they were miracles. So God affected the natural order by planning these exceptional events to happen. And that way, these exceptional events, or miracles, could happen against what normally would be seen as going against the natural order, or being seen as supernatural events. So, the challenge. So far, 3 ideas. One is it was a dream, so they don't have to worry about anything going against the natural order, because it was a dream. then we dream unusual things. And Balaam is learning from the end of this dream that he has to listen to God. So so it's a dream, or it is a miracle, because God can do miracles. God is all-powerful. God does miracles. Or the middle of the road, God can do miracles. Yeah, sure, but for us to satisfy our understanding of science and the natural order of things, what's great about God is that God can fit these exceptional things into the natural order to make them pop up at just the right time and happen just at the right time so that it will look like a miracle. Ruth.
Does the English translation actually say God opened up?
Yes. The English, it doesn't matter what the English translation says. What matters is what it says in Hebrew.
Right.
So the Hebrew text is Vayiftach Adonai et pi ha'aton. Clearly, there's no other way to translate this other than God opened the mouth of the donkey.
So what does the English?
So the English says it. The Old English, Rabbi Hertz's translation, says, "And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass." The Reform Movement translation says. That's verse 28, I said, "The Lord opened the ass's mouth." Okay? So whether it's the Lord or God, it's God opening the mouth. So yes, that's exactly what the Hebrew says. But did Balaam dream that the donkey did this? Or did God actually do this? Marv.
So, I mean, do these rabbis who claim that it was either a dream or that it was a pre-programmed sort of thing, do they also say that the angel of the Lord's appearance was also a dream? Or?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. So Marv is asking about the appearance of the angel of the Lord. So that's a different question, because there's a lot more occurrences of angels and people's encounter with angels in the Torah and in the Bible. Okay, so you have plenty of that, from Jacob's dream of the ladder with angels going up and down it, to the 3 angels that come to Abraham and Sarah to tell them about Isaac, and then they go on to Sodom and Gomorrah, right, to save Lot and his wife. And then, so you have the angel that fights with Jacob all night, and Jacob comes out of that with a limp and a new name. So there are plenty of angels occurring in the Torah, and that's a different question.
What I'm saying is,
yes.
It seems to me that's a more extraordinary event than a talking donkey.
But it's not. For the Torah and the Bible, that's not a more extraordinary event, because it's a more common event. That doesn't bother the rabbis, that angels are appearing. Because for the rabbis, it is, and in fact, the rabbis even create more stories than there are in the Torah of the characters in the Torah and the Bible having encounters with angels. So that is not a problem for them, and they think that that is not so unusual, and that could even happen. And the rabbis even write stories about themselves encountering Elijah the prophet, who's a semi-angel, right? Because his death isn't recorded. It's just recorded in the Bible, in the book of Kings, that he ascended in a fiery chariot. His disciple Elisha witnessed Elijah. Elijah takes off his cloak, gives it to Elisha, kind of exactly handing the mantle of leadership onto Elisha, literally. And then he ascends to heaven in a fiery chariot, which is why Elijah's not really dead, and Elijah is going to be the one who is going to be bringing and escorting the Messiah at the time of the Messiah. When we open the door for Elijah, we welcome Elijah to all brisses. So Elijah has a prominent part in our tradition, and there are many stories of rabbis having encounters with Elijah, which is almost the same as having an encounter with an angel. And we have Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, who are in a cave for 12 years. They have an encounter either with God talking to them or an angel talking to them. So no, for the rabbis, encounter with an angel is not an unusual thing. That's something that we can all strive for, to have this kind of encounter. No, for them, the the thing. They've never had an encounter with a talking animal. And that from the whole Bible, we only have the snake and the donkey as examples. So Noah on the ark, right? And when he sends the raven and sends the dove, that raven and dove don't talk to him. The animals aren't talking to him. But there's a great midrash, a beautiful midrash. It's a children's story as to why the dove was chosen to be the one to be sent out to bring the olive branch back. Because all the animals come and talk to Noah and say to him why they should be chosen by him to send out. That's a story that the rabbis make up. Just as Adam names all the animals, right? All the animals are coming forward and talking to Adam about how great they are and what kind of name they should have. So in Midrash, animals talk, okay? But in the Torah, only the snake and only the donkey. So the question is how to figure out this challenge and to make sense of it for the modern reader, because the rabbis and modern rabbis today want us to take the text seriously. And how can you take a text seriously when it's, let me say it this way. The text is supposed to provide us with deep spiritual religious meaning. Right? That's what the Torah is supposed to do. It's supposed to motivate us to be a good person. And it's supposed to teach us, provide us the instruction of what it means to be an ethical, moral, religious person. And it provides the laws for us in a straightforward manner. And it provides teachings for us to kind of put some of this, the religious ideas in a context that we can understand. So if we're going to take the whole text seriously, how do you take a text seriously with a talking donkey? We naturally laugh at it. And it is right? I mean, you can't help but laughing at this.
We don't laugh at the Torah. When it's there, we can't laugh at the Torah.
But why can't we?
Because it's holy.
Because it's holy. So Julian is suggesting we're not supposed to laugh at this. Okay, so we keep a straight face when we're reading this section. Balaam gets up in the morning, saddles his donkey. The donkey sees the angel and strays from the path, and Balaam doesn't see the donkey. So obviously there's a moral lesson there. Balaam is not seeing something that an animal can see, and obviously that's the greater lesson. But still, it's a talking donkey. We're supposed to be laughing at it, and that's the rabbi's problem. Then we're not supposed to laugh at the text of the Torah because the Torah is supposed to be holy. So how can we avoid laughing at the Torah? How can we learn this in a way, how can we read this in a way that we don't end up laughing at it? So either it's a dream, or we don't laugh at this because we know that God can do these great, powerful things, or that God, if we don't like the idea that God does pop-up miracles, that God planned these miracles, and that also shows God's greatness, that 1,200 years, no, well, according to the math of the rabbis and the chronology of the rabbis, so maybe this was 2,500 years before, at the sixth day of creation, God sets the timer to go off 25 years hence, so that the donkey is going to talk just at that moment at just the right time. So that also shows God's greatness. Yeah, so.
Could it be a possibility that since God wrote the Torah and he wants to, teach us about moral and ethical things, that he creates a story within the Torah to try to prove a point?
Okay, so Saul's saying maybe God wrote the Torah in a particular way to try to teach us and prove a point. And that gets to a rabbinic idea, Dibra Torah Bilshon B'nai Adam, that the Torah was spoken in human language. So, which gets to the point, God is giving the Torah to Moses. What does that mean, that God even has a language? Right? And that we can communicate with God. We are human beings. God is God. How can we even expect to be able to have an understanding of what God is, let alone to be able to have some kind of encounter with God. And so the rabbis understand, and this is one way for them to also answer some of the grammatical errors that they might see in the text. God wrote in a language that people can understand, and also in the way that people talk. So just as people make mistakes when they talk, that no human being talks perfectly unless they're reading from a text, and even then they can even make mistakes when they talk. So that explains some of the mistakes and also the redundancies in the text as well. People speak in a repetitive, redundant way and saying things over again that they could say and say the same thing again in the same way, just like I just did right now. So on purpose. So that's what the Torah does, because God wrote it that way in a way that we can understand it. So maybe God, this is another example of God teaching a story that people can understand in a way that people can understand. The only problem with that is not just a story. It's supposed to be, it seems to be a retelling. No, it seems to be a description of events as they are happening.
But the reason that I thought about that is because I'm troubled also by the fact that Balaam is, at that point, the Jewish people were selected.
Right.
To get God's word out to the world.
Right.
So Balaam is part of the Moabites who are idol worshippers.
Right.
So why was God, how could he even hear God? He wouldn't even believe God.
Okay, so yes.
So I'm just saying, well, I'm trying to be redundant, so
No. I'm just saying, so you make a good point, Saul's talking about why would God talk to Balaam if Israelites are the chosen people? They're the ones who had the exodus from Egypt, had the Torah given to them at Mount Sinai. No other people had the Torah given to them. And there's a midrash about why the Israelites were chosen for the Torah. God went with the Torah to the other nations of the world at the time. They all rejected it. Israelites chose it. So if the Israelites are the chosen people, and Moses is the prophet and the teacher representing God to the people, why would God use Balaam? And that's the whole point as well, that to further prove the point that that the nation of Israel is a chosen people, because even a Moabite prophet is proving to the Moabites at the time what would be the great power that the Israelites would have to encounter, that the Moabite king would see that his chief prophet is blessing the people, and his chief prophet didn't want to bless the people, but God is forcing him and talking through Balaam, as the rest of the portion has it. And so that's to prove the point also that the Israelites are a chosen people, that God can even use an idolatrous non-Israelite prophet to teach that the Israelites are a chosen people. That's the point. Traditionally, that's how we understand this portion. Yes, Mark.
Okay, so you said what is the theological lesson that we're supposed to get out of this? And I think the existence of miracles is very important, because it basically shows that God has freedom. That in fact, what happens is not all pre-programmed at the time of creation. Because when we exercise our own free will, we are interfering with the natural order.
Right.
I mean, when you take an action, there's some electrochemical process that goes on in your brain. But it's a purely physical process. It's caused by other physical causes.
Right.
And you can trace those all the way back to the Big Bang.
Right.
And therefore, you have no freedom. And if you say, okay, humans have freedom, but God doesn't have freedom,
right?
I mean, that's a difficult proposition. So if you believe in God and you believe that we have free will, then you have to believe that God has freedom. If God can create 100 billion galaxies, he can certainly make a donkey.
Make a donkey talk. Right. So Marv is making the point that if human beings have free will and we have the ability to decide what kind of action we're going to do or not do, then we also have to, and if we believe in God, then we must believe that God has free will as well. And how does God exhibit? How do we see that God is exhibiting free will, if not through miracles? So yes, I totally agree with you, Marv, that part of being Jewish means the acceptance of the idea that God can perform miracles. The question is, what kind of miracles? Okay? And what is perceived as miracles? So Maimonides is a great proponent of the idea that these events that the Torah describes that goes against what we know, what he knew about the natural order, could not happen. That's not something. But at the same time, he does say that God has the power to do it, and that the greatest miracle that we should all believe in is in the time of the Messiah, when the dead will be brought back to life. So even though Maimonides is a rationalist, and he comes from a tradition of people before him who were rationalists as well. In other words, saying that God, when the Torah says that God caused the sea to split with his mighty hand and outstretched arm, that anthropomorphism, as the technical term is, applying human form to God, is just that, an anthropomorphism. God doesn't really have parts of a body, and we should never understand that God has parts of a body. It's just a metaphor to help us, human beings, understand an abstract God. God has the power to cause the sea to split. How do we see that? It's as if God used his outstretched arm and mighty hand. Okay? In the same way as a miracle, the rationalists would say, it seemed as if that happened. So, in other words, it's not that we're denying that a miracle can happen. What a rationalist like Maimonides would say is that you use your religious perspective to understand events as if God was involved in the event, right? So in other words, we can understand militarily how Israel in 1948, how the Israeli army was able to defeat the Arab armies, right? We can understand that from a military perspective. But so that can seem wondrous just on its own. But if we do it with a religious perspective, then it seems like there's a grander events at place here, something part of eternity, something that seems to be a miracle. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say from this is understanding this unusual event of the talking donkey either as a literal pop-up miracle or as if that were the case, and understanding and reflecting the idea that we look at events as if a miracle has happened. Okay, so it's as if someone who I use this example many times. So like my second or third year here, somebody in the congregation was away about to get on a cruise ship, or maybe just got off the cruise ship and contracted meningitis. So was in a hospital far away from home with her husband. Family came down, and it seemed as if she was going to die. So with meningitis, it's touch and go. You never know whether a person is going to recover from the meningitis or not. She recovered. She lost some hearing, but she recovered from that. And so either you can just explain that medically, that somehow she had enough antibodies in her and she was strong enough to fight the meningitis. And that, okay, so you explain it away medically. Or you can say it was a miracle. Somehow God was involved, prayers were answered, right? So it all depends. Like you can't Can't deny that God could have gotten involved in that, but then it raises great theological questions. Why would God save her but not save somebody else? What makes her more worthy of being saved by God or having a miracle performed for them as opposed to somebody else? So that's the challenge of the text. Why did the donkey have to talk to Balaam? Why couldn't God just have talked to Balaam directly?
I thought he did.
He did too, but why did he also have to do the donkey? So I'm just saying all of this is just as trying to explain this challenge here. And it's interesting, of the 3 Chumashim I have here on the stand next to me, I have the Reform Movement edition, the Torah. I have the Hertz Chumash, the blue Chumash that all synagogues used to use. And I even have another edition called the Sansino edition. I don't have the Eitz Chaim, because if you look at the Eitz Chaim, there's not one commentary on this, which is fascinating to me. I don't understand why the Eitz Chaim says nothing about this. Says nothing about it at all. There might be something in an essay in the back of the Eitz Chaim, but on the page itself, you have the above the line and below the line. So the above the line doesn't explain anything, and the below the line, no. The above the line does say something. There's the only other incident of a talking animal in the Torah is the serpent. That's all the above the line says. Below the line, which you have, it's edited by Rabbi David Wolpe and Rabbi Harold Kushner, the below the line. They don't bring any midrash or anything. It's Hertz that has the long commentary here. So I'll just read part of it, and we'll end with this. We now come to the best-known episode in the story of Balaam, namely the speaking donkey. God makes the dumb animal rebuke the blindness and obstinacy of man. Balaam, like many a one before and after him, is saved from dishonor by unforeseen hindrance and brought to reason through means which human pride despises. Many expositors, both in ancient and modern times, take the account of the miracle in these verses literally. Nothing is impossible to omnipotence, they hold, and a speaking donkey is no more marvelous than a speaking serpent or any of the other miracles. Then he goes on, for over 1,000 years, however, the literal has largely given place to other interpretations of this incident. One of these explanations, that of Saadia and Maimonides. So Saadia was a great leader of the Babylonian Jewish community and around the 800s, 900s, so about 1,100 years ago or so. And then Maimonides, like I said, about 800 years ago. So Saadia and Maimonides considers this story as enacted in a dream or a vision of the night. This would account for the many incongruous things in these verses. Thus, Balaam appears with but 2 attendants and traveling alone without the brilliant accompaniment of princes and honorable ambassadors. In other words, how we know this is a dream? Because Balaam in real life, if this were a real-life event, such an important person wouldn't just have 2 attendants walking alongside. He'd have a whole retinue alongside him. Okay? Again, he does not show the least astonishment at the startling fact of the donkey talking. Right? So that should be another thing about the dream, that to make it into a dream, because otherwise in real life, you'd be startled that the donkey is talking. In light of this interpretation, this story depicts the continuance on the subconscious plane of the mental and moral conflict in Balaam's soul, and the dream apparition of the angel and the speaking donkey has got a further warning to Balaam against being misled through avarice to violate God's command. And finally, another explanation holds that the text nowhere states that the donkey gave utterance to human sounds. Its weird behavior in the presence of the angel and its wild cries at the cruel beatings were understood by Balaam to mean the words given in a text. That I'm not so sure about, because it does say God opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What did I do to you?" Okay, so now maybe the donkey opens its mouth and brays like a donkey brays, and maybe Balaam understood the braying as if the donkey is saying, "What did I do to you?" But you'd really have to interpret the text to say that that it's just braying and not talking. Okay? So there are issues in how we interpret this. So again, the point is, for our approach to this challenging text, is the idea of how we understand miracles that are presented in the Torah, and the fact that miracles that are presented in the Torah don't happen, those kinds of miracles don't happen in our lifetime and in our life experience. And so how do we reconcile the fact that the Torah records such miracles happening in the Torah's time, but these events don't happen to us? So how do we make sense of that? And that's how the rabbis are trying to reconcile their life with the Torah's life, and with an understanding of God and God's all-powerful nature, God's omnipotence, and how to reconcile all of that in a way that still makes sense, but not just makes sense from a logical perspective, but makes sense from a religious perspective. So we're not making a mockery of God, we're not demeaning the system, but rather elevating it and still keeping it holy. Last comment, yes.
So, since the Jewish people were chosen by God,
Yes.
are there any other occurrences in the Torah, I can't think of, after that time, where God spoke to someone who was an idolater?
So Saul's asking, are there other times in the Torah in which God is talking to, let's say, a non-Israelite?
After they were chosen.
After it seems as if the Israelites are the chosen people. So does God use other people? Yes. Yes. So God talks to Nebuchadnezzar, right? I think he's the one who is, or Balthazar, one of those, whoever is the head of Babylonia, and Daniel, in the book of Daniel. So there's writing on the wall in the king's palace, the king of Babylonia's palace, and Daniel has to interpret it. So the king can't understand. God's talking to the king, but needs Daniel to interpret it. So you could say that God is talking to the non-Israelite king. There are things that happen to other non-Israelites that have to be interpreted by Israelites for them, by Israelite prophets for them, but is God speaking through? Offhand, I can't think.
Yeah, I was just referring to the 5 books.
Oh, in the 5 books itself. So you have Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, as being seen as an important person. He's the one who helps Moses kind of organize the society. And God allows Moses to learn from Jethro how to organize.
But God didn't talk directly to Jethro.
I'm saying that for the purpose of the Torah itself, if the Torah wants to prove that the Israelites are the important people, then maybe only Israelites should be talked about. But the fact that we have non-Israelites talked about in the text show the importance of those non-Israelites to the greater story. And that, God hardens Pharaoh's heart. God talks to Pharaoh in dreams that Joseph has to interpret. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, helps Moses in delegating authority and making his job easier. And you have the prophet Balaam, the Moabite prophet. So all of this are ways that God works through non-Israelites as well to reinforce the lesson that it's the Israelites who are the chosen people. Okay, so it's not necessarily in a prophet, but in other means too, God using non-Israelites to help get the message across. Okay, so next time, the last session, I know it's 2 days before the Seder, and that could be a problem for a lot of people, but you can watch online if people don't want to trek out here, but we'll look at the commandment in Deuteronomy to annihilate the indigenous population of the land of Israel and how we understand that today. Have a good night.